In sport, there is nothing more satisfying than silencing a big crowd. 24 hours later, you could hear a pin drop as 100,000, 92,000 Indian supporters were
Ish.
stunned by one of the toughest, gutsiest, almost complete performance by serial champions Australia this morning. The experts were expecting a one-sided contest. The experts said bat first. The experts were right on one thing at least. It was a one-sided contest, all right, as Australia comfortably took care of heavy favourites India by 6 wickets with 7 overs to spare, chasing 241. Today on the Maxim Cricket Podcast, we discuss how.
Oh, that is brilliant. It's a hero maximum. On the ground, down the ground, another hero maximum.
My name is Munter and I'm joined by Lugsy and Jacko for a final World Cup show. If you've enjoyed the coverage, please do leave us a like and bang that subscribe button like Travis Head. Bang the shit out of the Indians today. Lads, I've got one question at the top today. What the fuck just happened?
Yeah, pretty shocking, I think, all things considered. I sort of went to bed at, I think it might have been 1:30 for three. Kohli set, Rahul set, and just sort of went to bed thinking like, righto, Kohli done, bit of like bottom order support stuff. India probably get 330, 340 and defend it easily, and woke up to. I think India just struggled to score another 100 runs, and Aussie did it at an absolute canter. So, yeah, not really sure. I suppose just big boys flexing muscles. Another World Cup win for Aussie. Chalk another one up. Gav, play my receipts. I've been on Aussie this whole tournament. So, yeah, just clip that in for me. And, yeah, up Aussie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're putting us in this experts category here, Munter, but I certainly didn't see Australia winning this World Cup. Yeah, I mean, what the fuck happened is Australia win World Cups. That's what happened. There is a DNA in there that goes back a long way, and they step up when it matters most. I refuse to believe any other team would have beat India in that World Cup final. There's just something about that Aussie team, the fight they have. When Maxwell got Rohit, I mean, I couldn't believe the fizz in him. And the edit, I was just like, oh, they really, really believe they can do this. And they're just going to keep in this, keep taking wickets, and just incredible scenes. I mean, yeah, there's nothing really like that final 100,000 there-ish. Just incredible,
Least
just
in
Australia
the,
doing what they do.
at least in the 2015 World Cup final I saw today.
Yeah, if I'm an Indian fan, that's not a stat that I'm particularly proud of. When it's 130,000 seat stadium, you've got a billion people. That's another what the fuck happened. I don't like. Did they take that towards the end when people were starting to leave, or because at the start it was absolutely loud. Because that was the thing. Because obviously it's not a good time zone for us. And when I went to bed slightly earlier than Jacko, and I went to bed probably at 70 for one, I think. 71, and the crowd was going absolutely ballistic. It was so loud. And then I woke up at 4 and trying to watch the last couple of hours, and I think Australia were 130 for 3 or 180 for 3 or something like that. And honestly, you could hear a pin drop. It was unbelievable. They ride the highs and the lows. And not like, cause not many people, no one picked this before the game. Like if you actually picked this, like you were looking for a bite, like there's no way you actually genuinely thought Australia were definitely going to win. There was nothing there's nothing that suggested that they should win this game. And definitely no one picked them to win that game at the toss when Cummins selected to bowl. There was a lot of raised eyebrows from the comment box, a lot of experts thinking, what are you doing? You're giving up the advantage on a slow wicket. And I certainly thought it was game over when Rohit was just going nuts. Like at the start, I thought, here we go again. 47 off 31 balls inside the first 9 overs. India flew out the gate, 76 for 1 inside the first 10 overs. I think it's the 5th or 6th time they've passed 70 in the first 10. Like Rohit's been like the spiritual leader. He's the Brendan McCullum of this World Cup. Just the way he's sort of released the shackles and come out firing. No one scored more runs at a higher strike rate inside the power play. And it took something really, really special. There was a special catch. I think Smithy was on comms, nailed it as per. And like you touched on just what it meant for the Australian side. That felt like it was the turning point. Like it was a point where Australia thought we are on, and you could tell by the way Maxwell was sort of screaming. So how big was that wicket of Rohit in the big scheme of things?
Yeah, I think it just goes down to that silencing aspect of that crowd. That crowd is probably their sort of 12th player. Really makes it that daunting place to play. But yeah, I mean, getting their leader to, everyone was probably thinking in the crowd, here we go, Rohit's on for a massive 100, and yeah, we can just go bananas for 7 hours straight here and lift the World Cup. But yeah, I think getting him, and then yeah, you saw that fizz, you saw how much they were up for it. That was just there, like, right, now we're actually in the fight, boys. Now it's time for us to like get a couple back, make this tricky, and let's probably at that stage I think in 300 or less is a score here. So sort of let's work towards that. But getting that first one and getting that big one of Rohit just started them off really, and they were pretty exceptional from there, I thought.
I think the big key with getting Rohit is if he bats 8 to 10 overs, you can sort of accept that if he's going to get 47 off 20. That's when Rohit goes deep and bats 25-30, it's game over because he'll have 150 by then. So I think to get him in that first 10, despite him getting away and setting that platform, it still doesn't hurt you so much that you can't come back. You wait, as I say, 15, 20, 25, it's damage done. It's too much. So you've got to get him in that first 10 despite the damage he's already done.
Well,
similar to when you have like a really good bowler and you say, right, if they get 1 for 60 off their 10, we're happy. Or like one, even if it's like none for 40, that we're happy. It's sort of like you said, like you get Rohit within 10, and yeah, India probably aren't scoring 400, but 300 was definitely on the cards, so I thought.
The template for India has quite often been Rohit goes nuts at the top, Kohli bats deep, everyone bats around him, Shreyas Iyer goes nuts, Rahul goes nuts, Sky goes nuts, 350, bowlers go nuts, game over. And Shreyas Iyer was out early, Cummins sort of nicked him off. But then sort of Kohli and Rahul, they rebuilt rather nicely, and you thought, oh, here's status quo, 148 for 3 off 28, here comes the launch. They did score very slowly, which has come under a little bit of criticism, 70 off the next 18 overs to get to 148. I'm not one of them that's going to criticise that, because I think the greatest one-day batter of all time has a few credits in the bank to sort of assess the conditions and go, this isn't a 330 pitch, this is a 280 pitch. So I'll give him that. But immediately afterwards, the tide did turn, and it was Captain Pat that did it again. I just want to list off some of Captain Pat's highlight reels as skipper just this winter. Twice with the bat, he's gutsed it out and won a game for his country. Once at Egyptian, and then again against Afghanistan. After 2 heavy losses in the World Cup. A lot of teams wrote them off. They were last place after two games. Sri Lanka were then 120 for none after not many. And it was Cummins that started the rot, which started a wave of wins for Australia till today. He did it again in the final. Kohli, who had been impregnable, chopped on for 54 off Cummins, and that's what started what I think won Australia the game. We'll talk about Head later on, but I think this next patch to play, where India lost 7 for 92 to be all out for 240 odd. Stark took 2, Hazelwood took 2, slow conditions. The performance from the Seamers for Australia today, unbelievable. Like, honestly, I can't speak more highly of them enough. In the last game, they had those favourable conditions against South Africa, and they were awesome, but they had the conditions in their favour. If anything, these conditions were made to favour Jadeja and Kuldeep. They took none apiece. They found a way, cutters, bumpers. This is a twofold question for you boys. Do you think we can now fully appreciate Cummins as the captain, and also the fast bowling trio of Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, because they have been on top for almost a decade now?
Yeah, I think you and I touched on this end of last week when we sort of talked about legacy stuff for this Aussie side. And if you look back at the last 6 months, I mean, World Test champions, retained in Ashes and Aussie, push India to the brink in a Test series, and now a World Cup that quite frankly no one sort of gave them any sort of chance to win outside of their dressing room probably. So yeah, obviously Cummins has got the sort of pulse of that locker room perfectly. Probably a pretty brave decision to sort of push out JL when he did, and sort of have Andy McDonald be there and be their sort of guy. So yeah, I mean from a captaincy standpoint, in terms of he's gone out on a limb of what he thought was needed and sort of backed himself. I mean, in terms of modern captains, he's probably got to be right up there now after the last sort of 6 months, and they're not on the fast bowling trio. That they could be the best there is, just in terms of record and ability to play all formats. And we sort of spoke probably about South Africa and India and even Pakistan sort of pace options for this World Cup. But these guys sort of flew under the radar all the way until the semi-final. Won them the game against South Africa, and then have sort of done the exact same here against India. So you got to tip your cap.
Yeah, because I mean, for a lot of this World Cup, I think this, especially early on, this was going to be almost the black mark against this bowling side, that they at this World Cup they couldn't put it together and they were relying on Zamps a bit. And yet, when it matters most, they have come together in the semi-final and the final, which, let's be fair, are going to be the two games that get remembered. They've stepped up as big as they can, and they've basically won this team the World Cup. So after the year they've had, I mean, it feels like an insanely up and down year for this Australian side. Just when you took it game by game, there's criticism in India, losing that South African series, the start of this World Cup, in England. But I mean, now you look back on it and they have retained the Ashes, won the World Test Championship, and won what would seemingly be an unwinnable World Cup. I mean, it's an insane 6 months spearheaded by that trio. Just incredible, really, to think where they are at now after this year.
Yeah, 100%. And even because even after the first innings, 240, probably 30 to 40 under par. I think 270 or 280 was probably par. 300's like a very, very good score. But I still think India have shown that they can defend that, especially with the attack they've got. And especially with the start they had, because they had them 3 down inside the first 7 overs, only 47 on the board. Warner, Marsh, Smith gone. Big names in the shed. Boys, if I had told you that Australia were 40 for 3 and they still needed another 200 to get, what odds are you giving them to win from there?
Oh, probably mid fours, high fours, 480. Especially in India, slow, spinners to come. Yeah, maybe I'll give you 480.
Yeah, look, and I tell you what, Smith didn't review and got hit outside the line, just which was an odd one.
Heaps.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, it did look out, but normally as a batsman, even if you are out, you review. So it's always a strange one when a batsman doesn't. But yeah, I mean, when Warner got out, you talked about the noise in that crowd. When Kohli took that catch early, there can't be many crowds that have ever been louder than that. They went absolutely apeshit, that Indian crowd, and they stayed up those 3 wickets. So at 40 for 3, I still thought India, because it just, the whole World Cup, it just felt like their World Cup to win. And I just assumed they would pull it out. Even 240, as you say, I was like, it's only going to take a couple of early wickets, and this suddenly seems a big score. So, I mean, I don't know if this is the time to pivot to Travis Head, but yeah, what a performance!
No, that's dead right. That was because I was sort of expecting another twist. I think that's what we all were expecting, that there was going to be one last Indian run, at least, and that they weren't going to sort of run away with it. But no, that was it. It was at Travis Head, MARNUS, 192 run partnership. Travis Head, 137 off just 27 balls, and a final. The seventh person to make 100 in a final, the highest score in a final while chasing. It was just calculated aggression, which I think sums up Australia in knockout games of cricket. It's calm, it's planned, but when the time is right, it is bloody ruthless. No one spared. Shami goes at almost sevens, the bowler of the tournament. Spinners go wicketless. Siraj goes at 6.5, and then he has the perfect foil in MARNUS, 58 red off 110 balls, which at first glance you think that's pretty slow. But it's partnership batting, and it wasn't easy when he came in. And it's a great story for MARNUS because he's obviously left out of the original 18-man squad, not the 11, like 18. Like there were apparently 7 players preferred to MARNUS when they named the squad. He was meant to captain Australia A versus New Zealand A. Could have used him actually with that series. But since then, he played 19 ODIs in a row by sheer weight of runs and injuries, bit of luck. He's the man when there is a problem. And that's what he did tonight, guys. How impressive was this partnership?
I mean, it's right up with the Maxwell Cummins one for me, I think. Just magnified on the world stage, like on the biggest stage, in front of a massive crowd. And we've sort of talked to a World Cup that like India's probably got the best batting lineup and probably the best bowling lineup. So whatever their batters get, their bowlers are going to be better than your other team, and be able to defend it or have set something reasonable for their team to chase. And for that partnership to be in a final in India on a rough wicket against that bowling attack, I can't remember probably just as big of a partnership in a final. Like I know there's probably been bigger individual performances than heads, but in terms of they were in real trouble when they started batting together. So
not easy conditions.
To sort of tough conditions in India, like. Yeah, for them to bat together, and as you said, like the 38 off the 110 or whatever it was is it is calculated because head's going good at the other end, and you've just got to stay with them so you don't have that sort of twist that Crom talked about. Like if Marnus gets out 20 off 60 balls and a couple of guys are asked to come in and accelerate when they're not in and not used to the wicket, that game probably goes very differently. So even with heads runs, so yeah, maybe the biggest World Cup partnership ever.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about the tough conditions. I mean, that tough conditions, even if it was a road, like to come in with that crowd, with that circumstance in a final. I mean, you'd still wouldn't, it would still be hard to score runs out there if that was the best pitch in the world, let alone what they were dealing with, though. But that's why I say I just don't think any other team would have won. There's just situations at that game that I swear Australia are the only team that believe and would have answered the call. Like, 40 for 3, but he just goes on the attack. And there's just such a fuck you about some of these Aussie guys. Like, they really they believe, and that you almost sense they want those conditions with the massive crowd there because they just love to silence them. We did just speak about it earlier, and it has been made official for the next week at least. Head has gone to number 1 in the head ranking. So, I mean, this is a massive call.
Wow.
He's overtaken Getting Head, so this is pretty remarkable stuff from Travis. And he goes to number 1.
Is that because Getting Head isn't around enough? Is that the reason behind it? We just need to see more of Getting Head.
Yeah, it's certainly. I mean, if you're talking to me directly, yeah, it is a huge issue with the. Travis has been there for me a lot more lately.
Travis is just a bit more consistent than Getting Head, unfortunately.
I mean, honestly, what an insane sort of 18 months to 24 months he's had. I mean, he's cemented himself as a huge member of this golden Australian era.
He loves tough runs, like important runs. I think that's like when the sort of chips are down and stuff. Like I think one of my favourite innings is that one at the Gabba against South Africa when like no one could even score a run and that just got 90 or fuck all. Man of the match of the World Test Championship final, man of the match of the semi-final, man of the match of the final. Like these accomplishments are starting to stack up.
Yeah. He's always number 1.
That's why he's number one. Okay. The opposite of number one right now is India. We probably want to touch on them. And maybe is this a choke? Is it not a choke? Because the big burning question is, if they can't win this World Cup at home, all the decks stacked in their favour, pitch conditions changed to suit their team. Maybe it hindered them, or maybe not. The best team by a mile. They've won. I think I've seen a stat in the last 3 World Cups, they've lost one group game, which is insane to think. If they can't win this World Cup, what World Cup could they win?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and I think
Rich from
we spoke
Kiwi,
about
but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're probably the only sort of team least likely to win a World Cup than India at the moment. But anyway, it just feels like for India, we said this, they were going to be a tough team to beat twice, which is where you're never going into a game to lose it, but they never had that loss. How do we adjust? How do we get them next time? Like
Not even a close game.
No, and
Really?
I don't want to say complacency was there, but it's more like that Aussie team was pretty battle tested by the time they got to the final. That had their signature win, that had that get out of jail game where they needed something special, and that had guys struggle who have come on and actually sort of started peaking at the right time. And I think that's how you actually end up winning tournaments. You see it all the time in sort of the NBA and NFL, and the team that's 14-0 or 72-10 just doesn't quite get it done in the finals because they're not that battle tested team. There might be a chemistry thing there. There's that getting on a run, that Cinderella story, which for whatever reason in sports tends to prevail over the best side. So I don't know if it's a choke job or a complacency thing, because I know they wouldn't have been complacent, but it's just you feel like you're better to go 6-5 and sneak in and go on a run than going 9-0 and losing the final.
Yeah, I can't accept that Kohli or Rohit or any of these guys would be complacent. I think as you say, Jacko, like it's more of just how many different situations were they in that World Cup that they really needed to pull out different things and different conditions, and it just felt they were front runners the whole way. I mean, it's probably, it's one of the most dominant displays for 10 out of 11 games you'll ever see at a tournament. And unfortunately, in the 11th one, the one that matters, it's gone horribly wrong. I mean, I really can't explain it that much, except for Australia are a battle-tested team that know how to win important games and got up for it. And it was just one of those days for India. I don't know if you want to. It's a bit lazy to say it was one of those days for India, but you can't really explain it. They were the best team there by a long way.
They
for
are
99% of the tournament.
They are the 73-9 Golden State Warriors. They just are. They are the side that broke all sorts of records, but then when push comes to shove, they panicked. I don't think they were complacent. I don't think they came in thinking they would wipe the floor with Australia or anything. But I think you guys touched on it. They weren't battle tested. They weren't pushed. They never really had to move away from plan A or plan B. Whereas if you look at Australia's run, they found themselves in so many different situations where they never really played that well. So many different people had to dig them out of a hole. They found themselves in all these types of situations. And obviously they played their best game last and India didn't. But I just felt like there was a little bit of pressure put on India, and I think they panicked and they actually went away from some of the things. Like, there's no real reason for Australia to read that pitch better than India. Like, that shouldn't happen, but I think that's what happened. Like, for whatever reason, India were like, this is the team we're going to go in. There was talks of Ashwin playing over Siraj, and I think that would have made a difference. You know, you think about the one thing we talked about when Hardik Pandya disappeared was they now have a really long tail, and it never really came to the crunch. But tell you what, when Shammy was batting at 8 and he looked terrible at 8, one of the worst 8s going around. You're like, tell you what, wouldn't have mind Ashwin walking in there. And then in the second innings, for whatever reason, every game Siraj had the new ball and Shammy's come on second change. And now a little bit of panic sets in. Shammy takes the new ball. Siraj bowls fifth change. He comes in the 17th over, gets absolutely whacked because he's not bowling with a new ball. Now, if that's Ashwin, maybe it's a different ball game. Maybe Ashwin against Head, that's something with his left hand or something. And I just think that's maybe a little bit of complacency with the pitch, but then when they're in the fight, there's just a little bit of panic that they're going to have to overcome at some point.
Yeah, I think you touched on it like perfectly about the plan A, plan B stuff, and it didn't feel like they played. They had to dig deep into their plans because it was either bat first and our bowlers will defend it because we'll get heaps, or the other way around and our bowlers will just get what we do, or we'll chase something because they've set us something reasonable. So, yeah, they didn't have to go into plan C and B and D, and Aussie did, and they had to go deep into that list. I think, that what were they 90 for 7 against Afghanistan, and Maxwell cramping deluxe, like that's probably plan Z as Andy McDonald's drawing things up for this World Cup. Maybe even AA, get around the alphabet again. So yeah, I think it's just when you learn different ways to win games, you can rely on that. And as you said, like that bit of panic, and like, Siraj has to bolt the new ball there if you picked him. So it's like, they went away from sort of plan A, plan B, and then plan C and D through whatever was needed wasn't actually there, and they didn't know how to do it, and they hadn't done it and been successful at it yet. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said with facing a lot of adversity in tournaments to get you through to a final and then having to win it.
Yeah, last thing I'll quickly say is because I'm sure some people will be like, oh, India had their moments where they were tested, straight away with that Aussie first game, but it's still Kohli getting them out of that. Like that's very, Kohli getting out of that game and getting a 1-400, that's not quite the same as having Maxwell do it once. He'd do it. Warner got runs at times. Mitch Marsh doing it. Like him, knowing so many guys in your team can do a job for you, builds so much more confidence in front running, and then just seeing Kohli do it. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to criticize that because no one draws it up like that, as we say. Like India being so dominant, it may have affected them in this final, but it's not like you're not going to take that every time. You're not going to not want 10 out of 10 and looking them as dominant as you can. So I don't know, it's a victim of their own success in a way, potentially.
It's definitely a monkey on the back, that's for sure. Should we talk about a tournament team? There's definitely a couple of changes from that final. So what we'll do is I've got here a first 11, and then I've got a second 11, and then we'll just have a wee discussion about what our actual final 11 should be. So with our first 11 is Rohit Sharma as the skip. He's going to open with Quinton de Kock, who's going to be our keeper. Virat Kohli, player of the series. He's at 3, averaging 100. That's ridiculous. Young Rachin Ravindra, he's going to be at 4, could be 3, could be opening. He just has to be in this side. Unbelievable debut World Cup. Big Daryl Mitchell, he is at 5. I mean, we talk about the big innings, 230s against India. That's phenomenal stuff. Glenn Maxwell at number 6. I think that was a bit of a given. I mean, that 200 will go down on folklore. Jadeja, he's been sensational with the ball, right up there with the top wicket takers and very handy with the bat. The bowlers, the worst number 8 in the world. Mohammad Shami was absolutely ridiculous with the ball. What's he ended up with? 24 wickets at 10. And he's played 4 less games than Zampa, who is our next cab off the ranks at 23 wickets. He's batting at he's going to be at 9. Then we got Bumrah. He is just simply the best bowler in the world. Don't care what format it is, what conditions. He is the best bowler in the world. And then rounding out 11, I'm gonna go Madashankar, who was the third top wicket taker, who I think is very impressive considering how poor the rest of the attack was. And for him to do as well as he has done without anyone backing him up, I think sort of says a lot about how good this kid is. Very young as well. The second 11, we've got Travis Head, David Warner, Mitchell Marsh. That's an Aussie top three. Shreyas Iyer and your fourth slot. KL Rahul, he's going to keep. We Afghanistan in here. Asmatullah Omarzai, he averaged over 70 in this World Cup. Master of a chase. David Miller was my finisher. I think that 100 in that semi just sort of tipped the scales for me. Now the bowlers, my spinner is Mitchell Santner. My three bowlers, Gerard Coetzee from South Africa in the David World Cup. Very good last spell against Australia, I must say. Shaheen Afridi with the new ball, and then Josh Hazlewood rounded out my 11, only going at fours in this World Cup. So, boys, what are your thoughts? Any sort of players that could sort of move up to that first 11 for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it probably knocks out our wicketkeeper in a way, but I mean, he probably has to sneak into that first 11. Man of the match in the semi, man of the match in the final. They've won the World Cup basically on his shoulders. So, yeah, somehow he's probably got to sneak in there for me, especially the amount of games he played. He was absolutely brilliant. Who's to say what he would have been like for a full quota? So, yeah, he's probably the only one in there that probably does need to be somehow on that side. But the rest is probably no real argument. Hazelwood going at fours as a stat just quietly. Probably could push the Sri Lankan for that last seamer spot, but no, I'm happy with those. Probably my only two.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Hazelwood going at four stood out to me as well. That's in this modern era, that's nothing short of phenomenal. Yeah, I don't think, I think, yeah, it depends how you do it. It's one of those age-old arguments, isn't it? Like the MVP versus who's the best player. Because he's going to be, if we were just naming the team on what sticks out from this World Cup, he's going to stick out as much as anyone. So I guess he'll be in the team people remember of the World Cup, whether he's done enough based over the whole tournament. That's up for anyone to debate. I don't think anyone's going to be mad if you got him in the side, but I don't think you can drop a De Kock or anyone. So it's just one of those things with what you want to think there. What Mark and Van
do you want to compare the stats? Do you want to compare the stats with the Head versus De Kock? So you got Travis Head.
I think the stats.
Well, it depends on what you look for. I don't think it's just the games played really, because you got Travis Head 329 runs in 6 games, averaging tick under 55, but he's got that strike rate at like a 128 with 200 and a 50. So that's sort of impact stuff. Where you got De Kock, 594 runs in 10 innings, averaging just under 60, 400s, striking at just under 110. So I guess it's just sort of impact versus bulk effort is sort of where you is the question, I guess.
Could be a blow off between De Kock and Head in the tryouts.
Just quietly, he got 300s, did he not? Did he not belt us for one?
Yeah, that was the second one.
He got two. Did you not get what did you get in the semi-final?
60 odd.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. So as I say though, it's just whatever you want to favour there. Van der Dusen and Marker maybe push for that second 11. Don't officially know how they ended up, but just in terms of memories, they set it alight pretty early with some of their batting. But yeah, I think the bowlers are Hazelwood, as you say, going at fours may push, but I think the batting's more up for debate just because there was so much good hitting in this World Cup.
The bowling does sort of fall off a cliff quite quickly. So I think there's not really. I've basically got like all the top wicket takers from like Santner. Basically, the top 8 wicket takers are all in there. So After that, you're looking at you're getting into your like Harris Ralph, who was like extraordinarily bad. Your Starks, who was sort of very good in the last 2 games, but very poor outside of that. So yeah, I think the bowling's sort of tough on, but the batters, what'd you say, Van der Dusen? Van der Dusen, he was pretty good. What did he average? 49, a couple of hundreds and a 50.
Yeah,
that's Mitchell Marsh actually. So actually 200s
good
and 250s.
Yeah, so Mitch Marsh, very good.
I guess it was between Van der Dusen and Mitchell Marsh for me, and I think just in terms of impact with the big Bison, when he's on, he's destructive.
The nickname gets him home there too, probably.
It really does. It just
when you're
Bison runs are big runs, aren't they?
When you're looking back as well, it feels like if there's a tiebreaker, you always take the team that's just won the World Cup, don't you?
Yeah,
100%. 100%. Okay. Any closing thoughts about the World Cup, lads?
I think just from our perspective, especially as a New Zealand team, this was really just the Champions Trophy qualifiers. Good for us to get into that, and when we win that, it'll probably be a more prestigious victory than this because only 8 teams are going to be there. So, good to get those Champions Trophy qualifiers out of the way for the Caps, and we really launch at this Champions Trophy and win the big one.
Yeah, again, very interesting World Cup, really, isn't it? I don't know how this one will be looked back on. Sort of disappointing at times with some of the crowds, and yet when the crowd was right, it was probably the best crowd you'll ever see at a World Cup in terms of noise and passion. So interesting there, and I don't know. I feel like in 10 years, people will forget Australia somehow pulled this out because it just feels like that was India's World Cup. They dominated for so long, and yet somehow we turn away from this in Australia once again world champs. So, yeah, very interesting World Cup. Good one. I think a good platform for a lot of the smaller nations. Hopefully can build on that, and you'll never pick against Australia again.
Yeah, good platform for India to go again. I think it probably means that we will get to have another World Cup because India now have to go around again.
Yeah.
Like they can't if they won that final convincingly, they might have just gone, well, this game's clocked. What else you got?
One day cricket's done. What sort of in the depths of that stadium when that game was sort of sealed, do you think the head of the BCCI was on the phone to the ICC saying, how do we get the next World Cup in India? Like, we have to stack the deck again. We go again.
That's what they're doing with the SA20. That's why they funded the SA20 so that they could the other shoe's gonna fall, and they're gonna be like, "You're gonna give us that World Cup."
Go around again. All World Cups are in India.
It's lucky the Indian crowd doesn't come across anyway as a particularly violent one, because that would have been absolute chaos in some places.
Oh yeah.
We're talking 30 for 30, the ride of Delhi.
Delhi
Doomsday.
It was when Bumrah had Marnus LBW and it got not given. It was described on comms as a tragedy. So that's where we're at. We're at one point.
Oh shit! Okay, righto. Let's wrap her up. This is the final show of the World Cup. If you have enjoyed the ride, then please do like and subscribe. We are going on a wee hiatus for the next while. I am fortunate enough to be having our second child any day now. This podcast has been going non-stop for a good year and a half, and it's been an incredible ride. Just a fantastic excuse to talk a bunch of shit with some good friends. It's a bonus we have had so much support in this World Cup, so thank you for all that. But now it's time to pay the piper, so to speak, as we as a group take a break, reassess, come back strong in 2024. Thanks to Lugsy and Jacko, of course. Without these guys, none of this is possible. When it's been a rough week, sometimes it's just great to talk about some dodgy pitches and the like for an hour or so. So with that, we will see you all next time.
Thanks,
a good
mate.
spraying India on our way out. Catches.
Yeah. What a real cricket England just in the closing too.
Here's the door.
Couple of minnows like India and England. Good to see them fight in this World Cup.
Catch ya.